work better than others?
Yeah. I would say reducing the scope of testing, using risk as a guide will work to deal with schedule pressure, and reducing the scope of development will work reasonably well. If you're careful to manage the implications of, if we're just reducing the scope of development now, but then immediately those features are going to pop out later, then that's not necessarily going to work. But if there's careful thought about, here's how we're going to roll out the features we don't get to later, then that should work. Adding people can work, but only on a very long project. So the shorter the overall project duration, the less likely adding people is to work, and the more people you would have to throw at it to make it work. Arbitrary reductions in the schedule that's not going to work, most likely. Flexing the rules of the software development lifecycle model, whichever one you're following, to try to accelerate things might work, but that's also risky because we see that with a lot of our clients, that they look at a software development lifecycle model, whether it be Agile or V model or whatever. They pick the parts they like, and they don't do the parts they don't like, which that's fine. You're allowed to tailor software development lifecycle models, but they didn't spend any time thinking about why the model included parts that they didn't like. They just said, I don't like that, I'm throwing it out, without going through and go, well, wait a minute, why is this in there? And what would it mean if we didn't do this? So that's one you have to be careful with. If you're going to flex the rules of the model to try to allow acceleration, then you definitely want to think through, are there reasons why the model was set up like it was and had that rule that I'm looking to get rid of? And what other change will I need to make to deal with the additional risk that I'm creating by flexing that rule? Does that help?
Yep. If you were starting your testing earlier, just starting with on the core part of the
yeah,
and then drop down a bit in later,
yeah,
could that not cause regression to happen on the core and therefore blow your testing out?
Yeah,
maybe?
Absolutely, yes. If you're following an iterative type of approach where you start testing on the core and then features are dropped in later as part of subsequent iterations or sprints or whatever you want to call them, if you're doing the Agile kind of thing, yeah, absolutely. But one of the consequences of that is increased regression risk. And so you need to have some sort of regression testing capability so that as the new features drop in, you regression test the features that you've already tested so that you're not breaking stuff that previously worked. And this is one of the things that you really do have to be very careful with in the Agile-like or iterative life cycles, because most of the time the core features, the ones that you get early, are actually the most important ones. But ironically, they're the ones that are exposed to the highest level of regression risk because they're the ones upon which the maximum number of changes are dropped. So, yeah, you really do want to take that seriously. Most of the time, I think if you're following an iterative life cycle model, you want to have some kind of automated regression test bed available to you to try to deal with that, because to try to deal with it manually is too painful, too hard to do. All right.
When your schedule doesn't fit the time available, you discuss the options to mitigate that. You should be buying in on making that decision. It's not just a QA responsibility to answer the question, is this in effect elevated to a project risk? So how it should be dealt with?
Yeah, I think ultimately all the project stakeholders need to be involved in that decision. So assuming that you assemble a cross-functional team to try to do risk analysis, quality risk analysis to determine what to test, then that same set of people ultimately needs to be at least aware of the changes that are being made to the estimate, because that's going to have implications in terms of the test coverage. Now, there's probably a differentiation within that team of people who decide versus people who are informed, right? So there are certain people on the team who would be the ones who would say, yes, that's the path we're going to go, but there there could be some iteration there too. I remember once getting a lot of pushback on a project on some performance testing I think that I was going to do, and was told, no, don't do that. We're going to drop that. So I went and talked to the tech support manager, and I said, you need to be aware of the fact that I just had this set of performance testing activities X'd out of my schedule and budget. And he said, no, you didn't. I'll get back to you. And off he went and had some conversation with somebody, and the next thing I know, I've got a phone call from, you know that conversation we had earlier today? Never mind. So, I think it's important that everybody be involved, because sometimes those decisions, those squeezing decisions, are made by people who, they're firmly looking at, I want to hit this date, and they're willing to make compromises to hit that date, but they're not really fully aware of the consequences of those compromises. And then once other people become aware of them, they say, whoa, no. You don't want to do that. Okay, other questions here in the room? No? Okay. Well, we'll see what we got here on the group. Let's see. A question from Peter. Hello, are you there? We're here, Peter. Are you there? Interesting. Is he still there? Oh, no, it has left. Okay. I guess he had difficulty getting the audio. Okay. Let's see. A couple other questions here. Manager tells me that I should estimate using Saturday as a work day, since we'll have to work 6-day weeks by the end of the project anyway. That's a good idea. No. Your weekends, your overtime, those sort of things are a form of retained slack, basically, in the sense that it's your reserves, right? And you want to have your reserves in reserve. If you schedule with your reserves, and then something unexpected comes up, guess what? You have no reserves, right? And then you're for sure going to have a delay, Plus, I think it's also very demotivating to people to see schedules just right on day one that are showing 6-day work weeks and 10-hour days and so forth. It's, you might get to that point for whatever reason in a project if things go really badly, but to just start out with the assumption, oh yeah, well, this is another one of those projects where we're going to kill ourselves, it'll be great, it's not something that you typically want to do. Let's see. Current project, manager cut my estimate back by 25% across the board. Said he wanted to cut every task 25% shorter with no increase in resources. This was called a stretch goal. Does that work? Stretch goal. No, that's bad. I think I've not seen that work. This idea of deliberately lowballing estimates in order to put pressure on people. Ultimately, this gets into the psychology of management, and so somebody wrote a book on this once, and in that book, the person said that there's this theory X management, which is people are lazy and will only give you their best efforts if you constantly apply pressure to them and chase them around. And so the idea of stretch goals is, well, the numbers they gave me when I asked them for numbers were padded because they wanted to make sure they had plenty of time to surf the internet and, take a nap at their desk and all of that other stuff, right? So I'll just cut 25% off of it. The converse of that is that was called Theory Y,